Did you have a link to the Google Docs? Like, for whatever reason, every time I log in, I can't.
Yeah, I can link it. Let me drop the link.
How are you doing?
Um, I went a little crazy in terms of.
Yeah, you did a lot of work.
It's really exciting. It's been something I've been wanting to do for 3 years. Like just getting the advice that you give me out there, right? Yeah. So that was really fun. I mean, even today I I listened through our meeting in like April of this year, and there was so much wisdom and guidance there.
You had it looks like you have a organization system for that you're using numbering and stuff.
Yeah, I'm experimenting, but at the moment, I'm not too worried about that. I think it would be smart for us uh, after I get a few more up there, to create playlists that have themes, right? So, like, one theme might be like justice, one theme might be like, I don't know, advocacy, one theme that might be actually study skills. So, that video that we did when you were like, Henry's melons are really good. So that one, there was at least like two-minute segments that were related to study skills, right? Like, and those just really act as a trailer. Like, ultimately, like, listening to you talk about how to study effectively isn't really gonna like, it might spark something, but like being able to split apart those meetings into 1 to 2 minute chunks can act as really like fun trailers to invite students to join the conversation and just to see what we're all about. I mean, just think about a Hollywood movie, right? Like 2 hour movie, and their trailer is also 1 minute too. So yeah, it's really, really cool. And then leveraging the nature of Instagram and my social connections that are already on that, like the amount of feedback already just from just from the dozen or so videos I've uploaded has been tremendous.
You
Like,
felt so stupid. You're like, oh, I put him on IG, and I was like, what the hell is IG? And then it's like a day later, it dawned on me, like, oh, he's talking about Instagram right now.
I think you could delete that Google Sheets app off your phone, and you can create an IG, but maybe later on. But for example, what's up, Steve?
What's up, guys?
Or
Hey, his
just
voice is back. Your non-sick voice is back. I mean.
Oh yeah. I feel a lot better.
we're talking about how crazy.
You see all that work Henry did over the week, over like the last 7 days?
The video production. Yeah,
that's a ton of work.
I saw your blog post. Did you see the comment I left, Henry?
Mm-hmm.
Like
Thank you for that.
Spotify is a nice touch.
Yeah. You two will get there. For the videos on my Instagram, Steve also took a little peek at. But for our YouTube, like some of those videos, some of our 2 hour long meetings, I completely cut up and I didn't like edit out anything. So I went into that project wanting to edit out stuff, but honestly, like each 1 minute video is like, if you actually think about the words and sentences composed in that 1 minute video, it's like a paragraph. It's like a paragraph of information. I'm sure it's not the most succinct paragraph, but there's a lot there. So it was actually really difficult for me to cut out anything because I just see so much value in what we're saying. But yeah, I think, Jeff, like we can make playlists on our YouTube channel that correlate to like what we talk about, right? Like, and then the IG thing we can talk about a little bit later.
Could you show me? Could you screen share? Because I don't have any. I mean, I know that Instagram exists. I was making fun of myself just now, Steve, because when Henry texted me, I don't remember if it was group text or individual, and he was all, "Oh yeah, I put it on my IG and something." And now like IG, what's the like 2 days to figure that out. I was like, oh, Instagram.
I can definitely show you. I can do that real quick. But I think at some point it would be valuable for you to also download the app, because their app user interface is really, really different than their.
Is that you, Henry?
Yeah, that's me. That's in there. Yeah, we're in Volcano, California, at one of my friend's mountain house. This was maybe 5, 6 years back. And we're on top of a boulder. And right behind us is like a huge lake that we actually swam to. There's like an island in the lake. But yeah, that was a fun trip.
Damn, dude. You're
Okay.
an NBA star.
NBA star, no. Okay, so IG has this, I don't know what you want to call it, but they have IGTV where you can upload like longer form videos. So like originally it was like 10-second long, then they upgraded to 30, then a minute, and now it's like you actually like Chris Emden, that dude on his IG, he has like 50-minute talks that he's uploaded on his IGTV where he talks with his community, right? Hip hop ed and science genius. And he just invites people in the conversation. So he uploads like really long videos into his IGTV. But here are some of the videos that I've kind of highlighted. I'm just playing out, like testing this at the moment. I have an IG handle that is TheLearningCode. I made that handle like 1 year ago as soon as we settled on that. So I think we're, definitely still in the testing phase. But
look at your game.
I recognize this doesn't move the needle, but it definitely gets the conversation going. I think this is,
I'll tell you what doesn't move the needle. Like keeping it in a classroom, it's like never recording it, like that doesn't, I mean, it changes the needle in the classroom, right? But this is one of the reasons that when I met you guys, like I think each of you has insights into the world as it exists that I don't have. And I recognize, I mean, I've said that multiple times, right? Like you guys bring stuff to this project that makes this project way better. This is a great example of this, but like actually having people watch the material to expose them to the idea gives us feedback, right? Like
yeah, a lot of feedback. Yeah, I've been thinking about that a good amount over the last month, but like the fact that Susan Ambrose's workshop, I rewatched that thing with my mom last night just because, she's really actively tutoring. But like the fact that that thing's under 1,000 views is like, I think if I summed up the videos that I've uploaded in the span of 2 days, I'm already at 1,000 views. Right. And it's not like I'm actually pushing or marketing or like, this is just using my friends. True?
Whoa.
Yeah, no, I'm not like marketing this. This is just, I mean, I like clump them together and I just put it out there at the moment. So I can give you an example. Like, for example, this one, it's got 134 views. I'm not sure if I'm sharing sound yet.
How interesting that, so this is like its own, this is not on YouTube.
Yeah, it's not on YouTube. And you know what's really funny?
Kind of a competitor to YouTube.
I try to hack this, so I don't actually like to keep IG on my phone for a number of reasons. Just like how Steve doesn't like to keep social media on his phone. Yeah. So before I started uploading our stuff, I actually hacked it with a clip I did with Scott Langford and in the work that he's doing over there at the Global Educators Network. There was a small clip and I was like, this is a fairly good intro, because in the clip I introduced the learning code, and I was like, so I literally went into the back end of the HTML to hack it to upload that little clip without having to download the app on my phone. But now there's actually a feature, like it's only been 2-3 months since that day, and there's like a feature built in where you can upload IGTV things. But like, okay, so I feature this post. IG has some really cool analytics. Like on my end, if I use my app, like there's heck of analytics, like more than YouTube or Anchor combined, that really can see how people are consuming this content and sharing and whatnot. But okay, so this is
the student makes the school doesn't make the student. Where in, here's a question. Think about every class that you've ever taken. How many times, count them, has a professor said, what do you want to do in the next 10 to 15 years? Why do you want to do that? Why is it important? And how can I help you achieve those goals? Right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there are, I would challenge all professors to do that type of work, because I think that's really the work that the student is sitting there to try to find out, right? to be honest with you. Like at the end of the day, that's what the student wants. So if they want that and we're trying to help them towards that, like I think that's way more important than learning the printf function in MATLAB, personally.
So that's a little sense of what that is. And yeah, just the amount of traction, like it's a lot. In one of Seth Godin's blog posts about like book writing, one of the tips, I think he had like a list of 20 tips in this post. One of them is like, make sure you begin marketing 3 years before you begin like really, really writing. And I think this is a super head start with some of this stuff. With that being said, and in some of the research or some of the re-listening to our meetings, Jeff called out the importance of being able to generate ideas, right? Like I think you were actually using the tool Gawande as an example for this, like how he's able to write not just opinion pieces, but like to generate really meaningful and valuable ideas. Like that definitely takes time, and certainly some time. The time that I invested in the videos that I was able to chop up and publish could have been time maybe researching and writing really, yeah.
So if I think like, I'd love to check in. I want to hear how both of you are doing. But one thing that I'll say is there exists at least one person on our team that has a pretty good mechanism to do that is replicable, right? I think all three of us do, but in terms of like like being able to describe that, I've spent years thinking about that, and I have no doubt you guys, I think I see you already in that development process based on your writing, right? And so from the standpoint, like, so in other words, you've already started that process, but if I think about what you're doing, I certainly could say I have no chance in hell of doing what you're doing, because I was questioning what the hell IG was, right? Let alone like, and so from that standpoint, in terms of value added, like you are generating ideas. You're actually generating ideas through action, and you're bringing another dimension to this project that didn't exist previously, right? And from that standpoint, like that is generating ideas. It's not the other type of practice that we've been doing, which is deep thinking and reflection on choose the topic, right? But you're like, for sure, this is a practice of idea generation and content generation. So I wouldn't personally, when I see this, I see huge value added from if I compare what you're doing to what I could do in that same space, like it's, I feel young. Where's my stone tablet? I'm gonna.
Jeff, did you get to see the Math Sorcerer YouTube dude that I forwarded you over text?
Yeah, well, it depends on what you mean. I didn't watch all of his videos.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I like
a general sense, right?
Yeah, for sure.
It's amazing. Like he has like thousands of views on just the little math advice and a little like some comedy skits. And to be honest with you, I looked through some of the like learning advice and like how to study math, and they're actually opposite of what our philosophy towards learning is, right? Like a lot of the advice that he's actually giving is like the shortcut advice, like in terms of like the deep thought on cognitive science and productivity systems. He's actually saying contradictory things in those videos. So I'm not claiming we need IG. This dude, I'll drop it. Give me one.
Is it like the usual advice where it's just like do as many problems as you can before the exam without necessarily understanding?
There's definitely some practical advice that he's giving, but he also couches it a lot of some of the language that he uses in not really, I would say, novice-friendly ways. So like the advice is like just like how that one time when Jeff said Cal Newport's writing in study hacks and productivity systems is him trying to bring up that pinnacle of the system, right? Students who are already woke and ignited and like just to be more productive, right? But if we think about who are, and we can talk about that later today, our smallest viable audience, that's not necessarily our audience, right? I think our audience is more students that we were not too long ago, and that still are. I still struggle with a lot of that. But Steve, I'll drop his channel in the chat for you at the moment.
What's the name of the?
I just dropped it. His channel is called The Math Sorcerer. Yeah.
I might have Is it like an old white dude with long hair or no?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I know like all the math guys on the internet, so. Uh,
But yeah, Jeff, and when you get some time, if you can download IG off on your phone, you'll see it's kind of cool. And then I also have a few people to forward. The reason I actually introduced this math sourcer guy is like he doesn't have IG, right? I don't, not that I know of. But the like little 1 to 3 minute chunks of learning advice and like studying advice that he has on YouTube still has a ton of traction. And like we can do that for sure.
So, I mean, that was part of the inspiration for this project, right? Like the idea that when I was creating this, I thought to myself, it'd be nice to have a separate space for the learning stuff than the math stuff, because just in terms of organization. So that's why I kind of like had a Conquering College as a separate project. And then Henry, when you and Steve and I, we were doing our independent study on just getting a sense of, how your systems were working. And then Henry, we did an independent study, and both you guys had a lot of interesting things to say about study systems and your own structures, right? And I recognized immediately when Henry, you brought this, and then I thought to myself, like, getting Steve involved here is really powerful. And so I think like I think we have a mechanism, we're working on that, but I think what you're telling me is that this is proof of concept, question mark.
Yes, and I would say there has been conversation that we've had in our meetings that I have since uploaded. I've uploaded close to 200 1-minute clips on our YouTube channel over the past week, over a span of probably 8 or more meetings. And in those clips alone, I would say, knowing what I know about learning now through the reading of those books, we're offering a more comprehensive guide or more well thought out advice than this dude already, than this math.
I mean, I have no doubt that the stuff that we're doing. One thing that I get caught a lot in is that I think a lot in my career about what I can do that I've never seen done before. And one of the issues is that I read and I listen a lot, or I used to. I mean, I'm a little bit out of the game in math stuff because I'm not like grinding in that way anymore. But I definitely agree with you. I don't the stuff that we're doing, I don't think that many folks have done that. Yeah. So I have a question for you. So what's what strategy do you think is? It seems like Instagram TV is its own product, different than YouTube, and it's interesting to me because I remember hearing that like in the past, people used to post YouTube videos on Instagram, right? Or at least on Facebook.
Yeah.
But it's interesting, like in one of the questions that arises immediately, because the way that I was looking at some of those, I watched some of those over as you've been posting them just to get a sense of what you were doing. And I was like, holy shit, you did so much work on this. And then immediately when that thought went today, I was like, okay, well, that means that the stuff that you're doing on Instagram, the metrics of that are completely separate. So they're almost like two copies out in the ether, right? There's the Instagram copy of it, and then there's a YouTube copy of it, and they're not at all connected, correct?
Correct.
Can you kind of talk me through that strategy? Because that's like, I'm not even intelligent enough, educated enough to have an opinion about that. I now realize that they're separate.
I want to give Steve a chance to share his reflection, because he also peeped at the Instagram, and he know, even though you're not actively on Instagram now, Steve, what do you think my thoughts might be for uploading them on Instagram? And then I'm happy to share what my vision is for that.
I mean, my opinion is kind of weird because I'm that old school, like I don't have social media. Like if I could have a newspaper, that would be my main source of everything. Just get rid of electricity. No, but I mean it's definitely it's boring to me, but I do think that I know at least when I was on Instagram, it's really easy to like find things and get addicted to it. I mean, that's kind of the way things are. So they might as well get addicted to some valuable content. but yeah, but I'm not, actually not too familiar with the IGTV. Like I've seen it, and I know you can. I don't know if can you even leave comments on that. Uh, okay, so it's almost just like a platform where you could put videos and put comments. Because usually I thought it was just kind of like the story that is at the top, but I don't know. I'm pretty far removed from that as well.
This is why you get A's in math classes. That's the, um,
Awesome. This is cool, Henry.
yeah.
Chief Marketing Officer.
Yeah. So since the batch of a dozen or so that I've put on IG, which is not the same as the 200 or so that I've uploaded onto our mutual.
Oh, I see. So you've uploaded a subset of ones to the IGTV of the ones that you did. So it's not that you're uploading both simultaneously.
Right. Yes, I strategically chose a subset, and the subset that I chose ideally highlight some of the meetings that we've gone public with, because then they can actually, if they feel like that trailer or that nugget of wisdom that we're sharing is valuable enough, they might actually peep the 1 hour long video that is our meeting. But so yeah, it's a great question you asked, Jeff. But I would say just within the last half week or so, I had over probably 10 of your past students share with me like, damn, Jeff is the real deal. Like I wish I went into office hours and had conversations with them about this stuff. For example, when I was at In and Out like 2 days ago, there was a guy who's in the engineering club. He was a customer in the takeout. His name is Grishan. And he was like, "Hey, Jeff, you're doing work with Jeff. He came to speak at the engineering club at Foothill to present a math research project." And he's like, "Oh, Jeff is such a cool dude. He like really cares about his students and like cares about learning, right?" And then Ryan Nan, Mark Nguyen, they were all like, "Damn, that's so cool that you get to do this work." And then all of this gets into I think the agenda item, which is what in the world is our smallest viable audience. And I really feel that it should, like for Steve and I, it should be like the immediate friends that we have in our lives, right? Like at some point we have said that these blog posts should, number one, provide value for us in terms of really reflecting on what it means to learn and what it means to study well. But two, like the next, I guess, branch should be like the immediate circles of influence that we have in our lives. And even if we just look at those circles, that's a lot of people, right? Like Steve, you probably have a dozen and I have a dozen. And if we convince one of the dozen to think about learning the way that we've been led to think about learning, that's a huge success because that gives it a chance to propagate, right? So ever since 3 years ago, Jeff, I thought so much of the advice that you've been giving me is just priceless. I shared with you, my mom paid hundreds, thousands of dollars for this same advice that you've been giving me ever since our office hours connections, right? Into private, like college prep application companies and council members. But it's not even, nowhere even close.
I mean, that problem, that's one of the sources of motivation behind this problem, because I think that's one of the ways income inequality and actually like achievement inequality is propagated in college, right? The college system is so cultural. So much of the ways, the expectations that we place on students are cultural expectations, and we don't really, the bridge problem is the exact idea that we don't actually help students cross the bridge over. And I don't personally, I really don't like the idea. I thought about, when I was much younger, thought about like writing a book on it, but I really don't like one of the things that's interesting about a book is that there's a little bit of a barrier to entry, but then also like what ends up happening is you compartmentalize that knowledge, right? And what I really want are, like when I was trying to figure out my strategy, what I really want is the ability to meet a student that's live in front of me, or in your cases, like if you all could do that as a team, right? Like whatever student we're working with, to have immediate access to anything that they need that's at their fingertips, right? So if they're struggling with, I don't know, trying to get an A on a test, and we can diagnose some of the symptoms that they're struggling with, and then we can say like, oh, okay, well, this is at your level where you're at right now, here are some things that you could do to immediately change the way that you're engaging in that test. Like, it just changes the way that at least my classes are structured. So yeah, cool. Can we check? I love it. I love it. I think there's a lot to this. I'd love to hear check in with you guys and see and hear how you're doing as we transition.
Yeah.
Wait. Can I try to add to that last part? Yeah. I think for myself, I kind of find it hard to try to, I don't know if convince others, because I still have to, I feel like I'm still in the process of convincing myself, because I'm still trying to become like a really great clinical student, and I haven't been there yet. It's been a long time. So I feel like, at least for me, like, I don't know if I can, like, I'm interested in like researching study skills and talking about it and implementing things, but I don't know if like, I personally feel like I don't have the authority yet to like tell other students like what they should do, because I still have so much to figure out. But I think once I do figure it out, hopefully next quarter, then I'll feel a little bit more like less reluctant and actually have some more confidence in that aspect. Uh, yeah, I hope that seems understandable. I don't know.
About 190 of the little clips that I chopped up almost has nothing to do with studying. It has all to do with like why we believe in students, why students should believe in themselves, like who are we as students as we're navigating and getting our college education, right? So I'm right with you there, Steve. Like I'm definitely, let's not take the lens of like students should do what we're doing in our courses, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we have to earn that authority for sure. And I had that really pretty painful experience with that friend who is has a lot to say about critical race theory. and I would say even in that regard, right? Like I think he probably came across a video that was talking about system transformation and such. But I also another reason why these short videos are powerful is not only does it give them pointers to the larger conversation that is our full meetings, but it definitely makes me want to treat the writing process with more care and sincerity, right? I will for sure, like, it motivates me to do the due diligence in understanding critical race theory and their tenets and how it actually is related to students' lives and struggles in much deeper ways.
Yeah, because you're making a public commitment that you've thought about it, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, let's do check-ins. How's that sound?
I'd love that. I'd love to hear how you
Yeah, maybe highs and lows. I actually liked our Rosebud Thorn. As I was listening to some of our older meetings, I actually really enjoyed that even though it's like kind of formal, but there was a lot of good dialogue in that. And maybe Steve, you like to start because I've been talking a lot more than you have.
Wait, so did you say you wanted to do the rosebud thorn, or?
Up to you. However you like to catch up.
Okay. So I've just been doing a bunch of, I guess, kind of looking into what the job application process is gonna be like, and it was actually kind of interesting for me because I had just come back from working out right now, and I was talking with a friend who's in a similar position, and he's actually at San Jose State, and he's about to graduate this quarter. And he's like, man, I didn't do internships. I didn't do this, but I'm trying to get into tech. And, like, I wish I had known something. And I'm like, there's a market for that. That's what I was thinking. Cause like, that's actually the problem that I'm going in through right now. And I've been looking up a lot this weekend, like just about how, I mean, even though like me, I'm constantly against not wanting to be on the internet. Like I have to kind of have a presence on like LinkedIn. I made a Twitter specifically for like data science and following a bunch of data science people and seeing what they're up to, like try to engage in the community. So I'm trying to like branch out into that, but just that transition from, I guess, school to industry, like that's another bridge that lots of people struggle with. And I think it's like pretty connected to what the learning code is. So I'm kind of excited to like learn about that and write about that. Just document that process. Okay, so that's a Rose, and then Bud. I guess I was kind of just sick last week, so that was annoying. And what was the
Maybe
wait, no. It was that was a thorn. A bud.
What's a bud? What's the
something
rose?
like something. A bud is something like you're
Oh,
looking
it's something
forward
I'm
to.
looking forward to. Uh, hmm, I guess I'm kind of looking forward to school to start for me. Although the registration process has been uh, not easy, not friendly, but it's just it's just the way it is. I'm used to hardship by now.
Have you been able to get your classes?
No, because they're math specific major or math major specific classes. So to register, you have to be a math major. And I had spent like the last 4 or 5 weeks like sending documents to different departments and them sending it between each other to get my thing approved to become a math major, but it ended up getting denied because since I'm not currently a student right now, that's not allowed. So I have to restart that process when I am a student. So then, and they told me that like a couple of days before it was my registration pass, and I have to wait till the 24th to register. Um, so yeah, I mean, I'm used to getting fucked over so much now that like it. I mean, it still hurt, but it's just a part of life.
Do you think that that's going to be an issue trying to get into your math classes? Are they impacted?
Mm, I'm not sure.
What are you taking? Real analysis?
Yeah, real analysis and probability.
118A and 120A?
I don't remember the exact numbers of what they are, but yeah, I think that sounds about right. And then 2 GE classes.
2 GE classes outside of the math department?
Yes. Or maybe 1 GE class. What if I can find something to get that 12 unit cap?
You have a academic counselor that you connected with, right? That you have a straight insight into?
Um, kind of. Not since COVID.
But you have the contact of somebody that you could talk with, right?
Mm, probably, yes.
I don't know what your degree requirements are, but when you sign up, yeah, I might just sign up with the best information that you have. But like when you're ready, as you're getting ready for the quarter, you're going to be taking 2 math classes that sound pretty intense. You might look into whether or not the GE that you can take, if you can take it pass, not pass, and still get credit for it for graduation. Because the difference between a pass and an A is like, 5 to 10 hours a week, right?
Yeah, that's true. Although maybe it's too ambitious, but like, I mean, I am trying to like rebuild my GPA, so I can be eligible for nice things. So
Yeah, but like, I mean, you got to do what you feel is right. The advice that I would give is, have you ever taken 2 upper division STEM classes in the same quarter?
yes,
And did you get straight A's in both of them?
I got B pluses.
B pluses, okay. And that
I-
quarter,
I'm getting there.
you're getting there. Yeah, that's right. I can just tell you that when I did that, you're thinking that it's easier to get an A in a GE class than it is in a math class, so it might be worth the time. That's a
Yeah.
question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess the thing that I worry about is that at the end of the day, like your major GPA is so much more important than your cumulative GPA in terms of time on task, right? And the general education requirements, imagine this scenario, you you work to get the A in the GE, but it ends up that you end up with a lower grade in your math class because you couldn't spend the time that you needed in that class, right?
Mhm.
And so the way that I always thought about it was, you know, there are some GEs that I refuse to do that with. So I took a history of the samurai class, 2 of them actually, which was, oh yeah, that helped me get to Japan. The guy that taught that class wrote my letter of recommendation for the JET program. But that class, like I was super excited, both of them, the first class I took and the second class I took, I was really excited about it. And so for those classes, I took a letter grade because I was like emotionally invested in learning that material. And so I was like, I'm going to learn it anyways. I might as well like, but for human sexuality, for example, like I was definitely interested in that subject from the standpoint of like, I'm a grown adult and I want to understand what's happening here, right? But the flip side is like, I didn't need that quarter. I was taking, I think, 2 math classes and I didn't need the extra stress. I ended up getting an A- in the class anyways. And I remember my friends were ragging on me, but like being able to go to sleep the night before midterms and just not worry about it was worth, because what would happen is like that extra time that I would have spent on human sexuality, I end up pouring into my math classes, right? Without stress about it. And so like generally in the transition phase when, you know, the counsel that I would give myself is put my biggest bets on the stuff that's most important for graduation. And that in that situation, I would say like doing well in those math classes. Like here's what I mean. So imagine this, Steve. Imagine you're able to turn the GE class pass not pass, and then you actually prove to yourself next quarter that you can get A's in both of your upper division math classes. And then in spring, you probably feel a little bit better about doing, instead of a GE class pass not pass, maybe you take that GE class. Now you have 3 classes, 2 upper division math classes and another GE maybe, right? But if you've proven yourself in winter that you could, what are your hardest classes, right? So if you've proven in winter that you can conquer those hardest classes and you freed up the time, that gives you proof of concept that you can take on the next challenge, right? But now put yourself in the reverse situation. So take the GE for a letter grade, take both math classes for a letter grade, and then for whatever reason, like underperform in your math class, right? Like that next quarter that comes up, you know, my feeling would be like, I would ask myself like, okay, well, what should I do here, right? But the strategy, I mean, obviously the strategy is yours, but always I say to myself, like when I'm building those skills, like 100% of the energy that I can put it into the places that's most important so that I have that extra leeway. And then once I've done the proof of concept, once I have that system, then add the additional, like, okay, now I'm going to do that other thing, right? But that, you know, the only reason that I can say that is because I've done exactly what you've done multiple times. And I like tried it and I fucked up, and I was like, not fucked up, but I just like what I expected is not what I got. And then I was like, oh, okay, well, let me reassess that, right? Obviously that decision is yours, but I like in the background, I would keep that as an option. What do you think about that?
I don't know. I'm pretty committed to, I want to take all 3 classes just because I feel like I've kind of evaded that for so long, like the last 3 years of my life. And I kind of need to catch up to the pace of trying to graduate within the time range that I want. And I don't think, like, at least compared to an average student, like they wouldn't say that's a crazy hard schedule. And I think like it's within a range that I can do.
Awesome. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Si se puede.
Jeff, do you want to go next, Jeff?
No, you go.
I have so many roses this past week for at least our project. Just getting the feedback from friends that I know recognize Jeff, and them finding some value in the videos that were published. That was really what I had thought would had happened 3 years ago, and now it's, you know, finally coming into fruition. A bud, I guess, something that I'm working on is for sure ramping up to final exams, and also finding a way to categorize some of the videos that I'm going to be publishing. I think there's probably at least another like 300 or so that I think, just if I dig into our archives of things that I think provide value for students. So figuring out what categories make sense, and organizing it in a way so that there's less, so it's less scattered for students if they were to engage in what it means to write scholarship essays, what it means to optimally schedule for their term. Having all that in playlists would be nice. A thorn. I probably spent about a dozen or so extra hours than I should have had in editing and publishing. So that is, I should reflect on that. But it was, yeah, I had a fun time doing that work and just re-listening to our meetings. It's like really mind-blowing.
One thought that crossed my mind as you're speaking, one of the things that in WordPress we can do is we can categorize our blog posts. And I thought to myself, like, the work you're doing to think about categorizing videos would very much transfer over to the work that we can do to categorize our blog posts, and vice versa, right? Like, so whatever categories you come up with, in my mind, I've already kind of categorized the different stages that I would take a student through from start to finish, right? So thinking about like 3 weeks before the quarter starts, 2 weeks, 1 week. So like I've done it temporally, right? So each category kind of relates to a temporal marker. But the flip side, though, is that there are some of the other stuff, scholarship essays from the classroom to the bank, building a resume, like all that stuff is a little bit beyond the scope that I thought about for the learning code, because my feeling was always if a student has really, really good learning systems, they can always leverage those to solve the other problems, right? So like that, everything hinges on that. But it would be kind of powerful. One way that we could use the work you're doing to accelerate the work we do in our WordPress blog is align the categories basically as we're developing our blog posts. Like, remember that the blog posts relate to the categories that you're finding in the playlists, and then kind of work from there, right?
Yeah, this reminds me of that 8-minute TED Talk that I shared on the YouTube comment I left for you, Jeff, the really massive one over the last week. But he talks about how e-learning is dangerous if we forget to incorporate story. So like a bunch of modules with, we've all experienced modules. A bunch of modules doesn't equate to significant learning experiences, right? So like, I think so many of the 200 or so that I've uploaded so far is really like just stories. Like each minute is a good paragraph. 2 minutes equates to 2 paragraphs, and you could tell a fairly good intro to a story. So like, let me give you a short example. I can use examples, and then I want to hear from you, Jeff. But I'll reshare my screen. So this is one that I uploaded like right before our meeting. Okay. Remember, and this also relates to the idea of using humor. This is like deep in our archives. Look, it's April from this year. Oh, just kidding.
Being a teacher is that students no longer think of me as a human. Like, it's kind of like when, like that phenomenon, like when your dad tells you to take out the garbage, you're like, fuck, and then like you go live on your own and you're like, oh, I got to take out the garbage, right? Like, or like, have you heard this one? Like, you go away to college and your parents get smarter.
No, I haven't heard of that one.
Yeah, so like I went to college and I came home and my dad somehow like knew more about the world. Yeah, because all of a sudden I was learning about shit that he already knew.
Oh, yes. Okay, makes sense.
So what happens a lot of times with as a teacher, one of the things that's been really interesting about, like, that's one of the reasons that I think it's so powerful to have you guys involved in this, because on my side, like I've tried to float this stuff for years. And one of the things that I always find for students that they're kind of the self-help students, like those students exist prior to meeting me, and they'll like really, really quickly take on to the material because they're already looking for it, right? But then there's a whole group of students that really, the students that need it the most are the least likely to take it on, right?
Right.
And that like, I think part of when I'm thinking about the development of this, like part of the whole thing of student narratives and individual narratives is to be able to make that gap. Sadly though, so like one of the things that's funny about being a
Okay. So I don't know about you all, but that's like a really nice trailer to, well, one, it's a really nice story, right? It infuses so many of the 7 things that I highlighted a few meetings back, those notes that I'm looking for, that I'm personally trying to, do in the videos that we make. And it like there's idea of narrative, there's idea of like what advice do we take, and there's idea of oftentimes the people who need the most help are not the first adopters, right? Like all of that within a minute. There's a lot in each of these minutes.
Sure. Your intuition here is powerful. Like this is, yeah, you've been working for years for this vision, right? You've been cataloging all of our meetings. You've been kind of thinking about it, playing with the different media. It's like you're doing in a PhD setting. We would actually capture this as PhD work, right? I would actually call this academic work, to be honest with you. But like you're basically doing what professional math researchers do. It's just that you're doing it with content that's based on learning and content that is created in a group setting. But like this is exactly in math research, a lot of times what we do is we have this grand idea of what we want to be true. And then what we do is we start to track individual components. So we'll do a little bit of work on one component idea and see where that brings us, and then track it so that we can go back to it. Do another component, track it, go back to it, and then start to look how those things combine. And then eventually we get to a place where we've got enough results in the different sub problems related to that. And when we think to ourselves, well, how are these things related to each other? And then eventually we get to a place where we can have that relation. We might have to introduce notation or basically bring new tools into this theory. And that's in this situation, a little bit broader depth. Normally in a math problem, you're kind of, I would be focused on one particular problem. So the most recent problem that I was solving was the electrical, the most recent big problem that I solved that took like many years to do it was this electrical circuit analysis problem to translate real circuits into non-singular matrix problems. And in that, there were like 10 or 15 different subproblems that I had to solve. But each one, like we do some work, we collect data, get to a place where we're feeling good about it, go on to the next subproblem, go on to the next subproblem, et cetera. And then after it's all done, we kind of relate those things together and bring the most relevant tools out of that. And so from that standpoint, like the collection process, in your case, those were setting up a system to film the video. That's equivalent to spending hours writing by hand whatever mathematical analysis that was necessary, right? The vision process, like what I want to have the problem solved, your vision, like you now have a viable solution to that vision and you're presenting it over the last week, right? Like that is the research process. What you're doing, I could identify that as literally PhD research. The difference is that most PhD researchers focus on subsets of problems that their advisors defined, basically. So the advisors like sitting out in the academic world looking for publishable papers. They have these lists of problems that are yet to be solved, and then the student comes in there and goes to try to solve it, et cetera. But the mechanisms that you're using, they're the same mental mechanisms that I would say the PhD research is based on. And it's taken years, like it literally took years of work to get to this space.
Yeah, I realize a 1-minute video isn't going to be a tried and true solution for anything, but I would say like when we have conversations about, let's say in this video, there was an idea of narratives, right? Like what are we telling ourselves that is preventing us from adopting the help or seeking the help that we might need to do well in our education? That if that's the kernel of an idea, yes, in theory, it exists in all of these pedagogy books on pedagogy, but like how many students are like reading books on pedagogy, right? So then if we can draw pointers by leveraging like, I don't know, these trailers, like write really well, like this, over the past week, especially with that conversation I had with my friend about critical race theory, like it totally makes me want to take writing so much more seriously, right? Because like there's a lot of doubters and there's a lot of people who've been scarred and have been hurt in their lives. So when like we can leverage story to help them see where we're coming from. And I think many of the 200 videos I've pushed do that.
Yeah, I hear it. I hear it. I appreciate that vision. I think you're doing good work there.
Okay, I'm done, I think.
So Thorn, I am trying to make these MATLAB videos and it's painful. I haven't had enough practice with my MATLAB class. This is only the third time I'm teaching it. And so I'm having to simultaneously write curriculum as I make videos. And the issue with that is that curriculum takes a ton of time to write. So the last week, like right now, I'm about to do this one on if statements, but the issue in if statements is that they're based on logical variables, logical operations, relational operations, and then test statements, basically, or test states. So each of those is at least a 15-minute video, but for a 15-minute video, the curriculum associated with a 15-minute video is about minimum of about a 6-hour writing job. So I'm supposed to finish that set of videos this week because I need 96 minutes per week to meet my goal for the particular leave that I'm on. In my previous leave, it wasn't an issue because I've taught Math 2B 12 times. So I've had like 5 years of development. I think I taught, no, 6 years of development, 7 years of development, actually, because I taught it summer of my first year. This is now my 8th year, right? And then also a lot of the mathematical research that I've done over the last 4 years has all been focused on content for Math 2B. So I wasn't able to, when I was doing the research, I wasn't able to make videos, right? So when I turned on that light switch in spring, it was like, I still have like 40 hours of content that I could make in an instant. Like I could literally just like open a thing and then just like write notes and I have to be ready. But in MATLAB, I've only taught that class for 3 years and it's only once a quarter. So I've literally only had, this is the third pass around. And so there's like a ton of content that I want to make videos for, but I haven't actually created the curriculum. But I'm on the clock. And so that's been just freaking brutal because it means that like every week I'm just like scraping by the hair on my chinny chin. And I've been doing the strategy where I'm not, all the IEEE 754 stuff I haven't actually written up yet for video production because I want to build out my videos and stuff that I haven't yet created. And so it's just like this brutal cycle where I'm behind and I'm like, but it's fun from the standpoint of I'm churning out content that is new and that's difficult. So that keeps part of my brain that I want to keep alive. Like there's like a spark there. Bud, I'm excited about this next round. The if statements, I have a lot to say because I think this quarter, one of the visions that I have for my MATLAB class, I think I'm going to have my students write a library of their own matrix functions. So they're going to be able to write functions that replicate the built-in functionality of MATLAB on their own. And this was stuff that was done in the 1950s and 60s. So it's definitely not state of the art in the sense that from the 60s through the 90s, really, the scholars, the next generation of scholars, like from the 45 until the 60s, basically, Wilkinson and Forsyth, and there was a bunch of scholars whose main job was to take operations in CPUs and make them make linear algebra stuff work on them. And so from that standpoint, like they were a lot of times optimizing these operations in individual machines, doing a lot of analysis on that. And so it ended up that generation of scholars set the foundation from the like mid 60s to really the 90s. That's actually 2 generations of scholars. But from that standpoint, as we got into like LSI, VLSI computations, they really started to like optimize so that the base operations had already been figured out. And then they said, like, how do you do this faster? So like the state of the art in the 1950s, if you could solve a 10 by 10 matrix problem on a computer within a few minutes, like that was like top notch, right? By the 1980s, that had gone to like the thousands, and by the 2000s, that's like in the hundreds of thousands. If sparse matrices, you could do millions by millions. And so, one of the things, MATLAB was 1984 that it came around. The whole purpose of MATLAB was to allow folks to be able to take, MATLAB's original was just a matrix calculator. So the whole idea was like, there was no easy way for students to be able to take advantage of matrix calculations in something called BLAS, which is BLAS, basic linear algebra subprograms, because in order to do that, students would have to have a really, really good idea of computer architecture. And then they also have to have access to some computer language that would allow them to import many of those libraries inside. And so what Cleve Moeller said is like, I want my students to be able to work with these ideas, but not have to spend all the time up front become computer scientists. And so he wrote this basic, matrix calculator, which was MATLAB, that allowed students like this portal into matrix world without all the overhead of computer science. And so it ended up like, oh yeah, by the way, matrices are really the Steve, one of the things that I was trying to tell you the other day on one of our walks was, if you're serious about going into data analytics and you want a portal to career advancement, like I would definitely not focus on real analysis as the only thing that you focus on, or algebra or whatever. And the reason that is that a lot of computations are based on matrix calculations. And so like when I think about the pyramid of numerical analysis, the individual functions are important for sure. Like how do you calculate sine or square root or whatever. But in terms of like industrial scale computations, all of that is based in matrix calculations. And MATLAB is a prototyping language that allows students to be able to quickly test algorithms based on matrices without a bunch of overhead that would be necessary in a programming language like C, that's a general programming language and has matrix libraries, but it's not designed for matrix libraries. It's designed to solve general problems, right? And so as I've been thinking about my class, as I've been trying to like generate that, one of the things that I thought this quarter, I mean, I've actually thought this for years, but it's like, I will say, it is so nice not to be teaching while I'm generating content, because it like, the amount of work that content generation takes is like 1.5 times the amount of work that it costs to actually like show up and counsel, right? But I think if I can get these basic programming structures in a way that students can fully understand what they're doing, at least at the syntax level, I should be able to have students write entire libraries of matrix functions that rival what they were doing in the 1950s and 60s. Or another way to say that is, by the time the students finish that class, they would have a rudimentary understanding of what's happening under the hood on almost all MATLAB matrix operations, because they'll have coded their own functions. Now, that's not state of the art because it's very far from optimized, but the nice thing is once my students have that, the rest of it is just like understanding how memory works and what are some of the things that we can do to change, like, how are matrices stored in contiguous memory? Are they stored by rows or are they stored by columns? What's the cost to go from main memory to cache, from cache to registers, and that's all stuff that if a student decides to go further on that, they can have that. And so anyways, like that is a huge bud. It's like, it's exciting because that's, I've had that vision. It's one of the reasons that I chose to come to Foothill. Like the math 2B class is really important because it sets the theory behind it, but the MATLAB class is the way that theory works out. And so it's just fun, this is multiple years of development. It's fun to get to a stage where I'm like, okay, I'm close. Like, within a few years, I should have that whole library set up. And then, so the rows, I suppose if I'm talking about like technical roses, one good piece of news is that I've been able to do a lot of, so I had the for loop stuff is the first time that I've filmed videos on for loop, and I was actually able to finish like 100 minutes of content on that topic last week. And then I also, for the first time in my life, started to make diagrams to discuss computer architecture and decode or fetch, decode, execute cycles, and like what eventually, like what I really want to do, I'll stop now because I can talk for days about this. I want to teach Math 22 and show students how to implement logic using transistors, and then if we were to combine Math 22 with Math 2B with Engineering 11, those 3 classes, by the time my students finish that, they would basically have the equivalent of a world-class introduction to numerical computation and matrix calculations, because they would have a lot of insights to that. And then the computer architecture structures, one of the things that I want to do is like, I want students to not only understand what they're doing in syntax, but I want them to understand what's happening underneath. And that problem, I need a few more years of development, because it's like, I could spend like probably 200, 300 hours developing that before I actually make a single video on it, just because the amount of, it's complex enough that to simplify it well, make things as simple as possible, but not simpler, right? And so anyways, like I'll shut up on that, but it's just nonstop work, which is good.
Dang, that is so exciting. Just like how you're helping your students see under the hood of MATLAB, we're helping our students see under the hood of what learning can be.
Yes. Well, this is nice because it keeps, one of the things that's really not, I don't, you ever hear about the story of the sisters who played chess? It's in the talent code, I think. There was a Russian man who made a bet. He actually, I think he put an ad in a newspaper of asking for a woman that wanted to have children with him so that he could make his children into world-class chess players. He had this hypothesis that good chess players are not born, they're made. And he wanted to test that by having kids and turning them into world-class chess players, even though he himself wasn't a chess player. You know the story? This is a true story, by the way. Yeah. So anyways, he had these 3 daughters. He turned them into world-class chess players. And one of, you remember this one? So at one point, one of the daughters, they were great chess players. I mean, they were world renowned. They were winning tournaments, etc. And so his theory was proven, right? Like that you could, before he had kids, he had the intention of turning them into great chess players, and a woman got married with him. They did it. And at one point, one of the daughters quit chess, and the chess press. Oh, did you see that move? Oh, she took that rook like a champion. Let's rewind that so we can see it again. So the chess press go to her, why was chess too much for you? Right, as if the pressure was too much. And she turned and said to the press, it wasn't that chess was too much, it was that chess was not enough. In other words, I wanted more in my life than what chess could offer. And the amount of time that it took to be great in chess drowned out some of the other things that I wanted for my life. And I feel the same way in my teaching career about mathematics for students, right? Like, math is beautiful and it's wonderful and it does great things, but math by itself is not a solution. I don't believe that on its own math solves students' problems. I think math is a tool, is a habit of thought and action that we can leverage to do work in things that matter. But the question is, well, what matters to you, or what matters to me, or what matters to our students? And I think that this project keeps that development alive. And it's a very, very nice, I would say it's higher order of precedence than the math content. Because if we can solve this problem, if students can solve the problems that we're talking about and recognize math as a tool in that process, then I feel like that Scarface movie, right? The world is yours. Except instead of white powder, it's like calculators.
I see it. I see what you mean, Jeff. One quick note about the chess being commentated is the reaction videos. I feel, I have no doubt in my mind at some point, when you get into small group facilitation, like just being able to provide feedback towards students' work in that type of way, because there's only a finite amount of problems that students make on those, usually, right, on those assignments. And if you're to highlight them one at a time, one per quarter, you'll cover it.
I mean, I was thinking one per assignment, right? Like if I spend so much time grading, it wouldn't, like an extra 6 minutes, especially if I do a rule like I do on like we've been doing on our blog posts, right? You guys nailed those last 2 blog posts, by the way. Henry, I'll get that comment up. I would like to start commenting on every post that you guys post. It's just, that's a new habit. And so I'm kind of taking that slow. But the, yeah, I was like, I'd been thinking about if I make a rule like I've been doing on my blog post that I only have this amount of time. That's like what you wrote in your article, right, Steve? Time-based habit, right? So I finish grading and then I get 10 minutes to make a video and then that's it. Like no editing, like that video's over. Yeah.
Go ahead, Steve.
I guess this kind of like leads, or I don't know if this leads into, but I know me and Henry had talked before the last meeting, and we had talked about just the blog process and writing, and we feel like we can maybe write more often. Although I know there's like, I mean, obviously the problem with that is like trying to write weekly it could probably be overwhelming. So we're just kind of brainstorming and throwing around ideas. Like, what if we try to aim for like weekly? I don't know if we necessarily post them or if we're just writing them to write. Because I think if we write more often, it can really help with the writing and just habit building process. But maybe the constraint to like make up for like to make it not as demanding, probably like limit like a word count like 300. But if we're constantly turning out a little bit more, maybe it could help us in our development of our writing skills. And so we talked about that, but I couldn't attend the last one, so I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
Yeah, so we talked about that right before the last week's meeting. So one way we can do it is we can actually, if we want to increase our frequency in terms of publishing what we write to just be more conditioned, we can do that on our own pages. But I think we also settled on the idea that if we feel like it fits those 6 central themes, then yeah, you're more than welcome to, like, we are more than welcome to publish once a week, I feel. On the actual page. It's not like there's a ton of people looking at our blogs at the moment. So the whole premise of it,
more than 0.
True. The whole idea is like, for almost all the blog posts that I've ever published, ever since OpenStax, I kind of crammed them like before the due date. And if that's happening too with the learning code, and I have to work out of that habit at some point. But I think if like there will be times where I like take 2 weeks off writing in terms of the learning code. Like I'm trying to collect and gather information for sure on my weeks to weeks and days to days. But as far as like sitting down and writing, yeah, I need to space that out more. And the solution that Steve and I have been discussing is like, well, if we commit to publishing once a week, then they'll by nature increase the frequency of sitting down and writing per week.
So I'm so happy you said that. I was actually thinking, I think one of the things that I felt really strongly about when we made this commitment is slow and steady. And I actually wanted to wait until we had multiple months of hitting every deadline. I might make, I actually feel that we're ready for that. I was noticing that on the last 2 blog posts. I was like, okay, I think we've, as a team, I think we've hit enough of our deadlines to know that we can do this. Like, I don't know how you all feel about that, but I definitely feel that way. Like, I feel like we're in a good habit now. When I was thinking about this, 2 thoughts came back to my mind. Instead of going from every 3 weeks to every 1 week, could you guess what I was thinking? Every 2 weeks. And then we had at one point talked about bringing Catherine Lee in as a team member. I don't know if she's still interested in doing this work. It would be fun to circle back with her. If we had a 4th team member and each of us did one every 2 weeks that we posted. I'm not talking about that we write, right? Like you all could write. So one thing that I really liked about that YouTube book is they talked about collecting content. So if you're going to produce, instead of producing like 1 video a week, in like a weekend, produce like 7 videos and then release them once a week for 7 weeks, right? So like grouping content, because otherwise like every week is a struggle, right? And so there's no reason why if we're going to produce stuff every 2 weeks, like you could front load your stuff, right? like you could get at one, or we could get ahead in such a way that like if you're doing it every other week, you could produce in week 1, you could write a content that's going to go on week 2. Week 2, you write content week 3. And then like at that level, if you're able to do that and you're able to do it for like 4 posts or whatever, like a month or whatever, then come back and report back like, okay, I've written 4 posts in 4 weeks. Here they are, right? I think I'm ready to commit to every week. Because one of the things that I think is really powerful for our post is that we have a consistent posting schedule that we're able to hit. And I know for myself, it is at this moment not so hard for me to produce one every 3 weeks because I'm not teaching, right? And I would imagine, Steve, you're probably feeling something like that as well, right? Like, yeah. And what I worry about, one of the, Henry is a different in a different game right now, in the sense that you're going through the classes and you're trying to do this. But what I worry, one of the things that I feel really strongly about in performance is small successes mean a lot more than are actually really powerful, and small failures add up. And so the one concern that I have is I'm about to go into teaching every month, in like a month from now. And if I'm committed to like once a week and then shit gets hard, like that's an issue, right? And so one thing that we could do, and then the other thing that I would say is like consistent posting. Like right now, I love the fact that every Friday at 6 p.m. we're hitting that deadline, right? So one thing that we could do in the next, like between now and December, is we could produce, I don't know what you guys, I'm thinking for myself, one every 2 weeks. That's it. Before we spoke, I had actually thought about this. But we could continue basically we could produce unposted material, right? Because it gives, like, that gives some leeway in the sense that, like, if you have a really tough week in winter quarter, that's a midterm week, and that's your week to produce, then you're not like, oh my God, like I have nothing to post, right? You're like, oh, okay, I had 4 in the bank that I haven't used yet. Obviously, the goal is to write as much as we can, but the flip side of the coin is, like, it just gives you that leeway. Whereas if we change our posting schedule, like one of the things that I would like to get to eventually, it would be really fun if our team could post 2 per week, every week. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And it would be amazing if we could produce 4 per week, wouldn't it? But like, what I feel is like, let's work our way up to that in a series of successes and like build in flexibility. I'm willing to be challenged on this. Like, if you guys feel really, really strongly that you want to post every week, I would do it. But like, from my standpoint, the way that I would increase frequency is, or that I would suggest that we increase frequency as a team based on my own habits of writing, is start to write more often, but just don't post them. Like, just, and then what that would allow us to do, like one of the things that I've really wanted to do for you guys is act as an editor. So I have years of experience in editing my own work. Henry, you've gotten a small sample of the type of editing that I do, right? But what I haven't wanted, that editing can be a little bit difficult because it's really a deep dive and it takes some time. One of the things that we could do to turn that hose on a little bit is each of us could commit to writing 2 per month, but we keep our publishing schedule to once a week. And then the additional, the add-on is we each comment on each other's blog posts every time we post. And for the extra posts that we've written but not posted, we start to learn to edit each other's work. And we don't have to answer this question today. We can come back next week and reflect on this. But Steve, what you said, it was also on my mind, as you could probably tell that, right?
Yeah.
But I think there are some distinct benefits to that type of structure that build in flexibility for when shit hits the fan. And I think that's one of the, like, that is a habit of success that I take really seriously. Don't make commitments based on the best case scenario. Make commitments on the worst case scenario, make public commitments based on the worst case scenario, make private commitments that challenge that worst, that push behind that. And then as one converges on the other, then up the public commitment. What do you think of that? Just maybe let's leave it as a cliffhanger and we can come back next week and kind of reflect. Does that sound okay?
Yeah, sounds good. You gotta go, right? Okay. And then we'll talk.
I did want to hear you guys' response, but I think I should probably roll. Can we put that on our first item next week, just to like a recap and revisit?
Mhm.
And if you wanted to, you don't have to like. So let's say that you guys came back next week and you're like, I think that was a horrible idea. I want to post every 2 weeks. And I've already started writing those. Right? So like, write as if we're going to post every 2 weeks, and then we can make the decision later, like, yeah. Or every week if you wanted to, right?
Mm-hmm.
All right. It's great to see you guys.